I turned $6,000 into like $400,000. I was 23, and 23-year-old men are the stupidest, most impressionable like group of humans on the planet. So I didn't really know how to handle that amount of money at that age. And then I kept trading and eventually blew like half of it, including losing $150,000 in a day on one trade that was really stupid. Yeah, that sucked. So I lived in Hell's Kitchen my first year in New York, largely because I had never lived in New York before. And I knew a guy who was a rising second year at Columbia, and we grabbed drinks when I was up visiting some friends in like May of 2022. And he needed a roommate, I needed a roommate, so it worked out well. And he just toured apartments like all over the general west side of Manhattan. I had no idea like where we needed to live or whatever. He said we needed to be somewhere near the 1, 2, and 3 lines, and he found an apartment on West 47th Street. So we lived there for a year. It was fine. I didn't want to stay in Hell's Kitchen after that, so I moved further downtown 13 months ago. Just re-signed my current lease, so it's been a lot. Hell's Kitchen was great. I like the West Village a lot more, but they both have their perks.
Nice. And then you just trek up to Columbia whenever you need to be
just hop on the 2-3 train all the way up to 96th and then switch to the 1 the rest of the way.
Cool. And that business school just finished a couple of months ago?
Yes. Yeah, May of this year. So 4 months ago.
And how long do you think you'll stay in New York for?
Probably a while. Before business school, I had this idea that maybe I would go to New York for 2 years and then move to, like, I'm from Georgia, so maybe move back to Georgia, maybe move to like Texas or somewhere else that's just, I'm from the South, so you think you'll just move back to the South. And then I love New York. Like, I'll probably be here for at least 3 or 4 years. I don't see myself moving anytime soon.
Amazing. Okay, before we get into how you grew up in Georgia, in the reading capital of the world.
It self-proclaimed, yes.
Okay, what is a typical day for you like as a writer? Like writing your own blog, working for Robinhood, and well, now you're writing a book as well, right?
Yes. So I'm still figuring out. I literally just started on the book in the last week, so actually writing it. So I'm still very much figuring out the routine. But from the hours of like 8:30 to 5:30ish, it's about the same as, I don't know, anybody else. Like, I have my job. If I'm going to the office, I get at the office at like 8:45, grab breakfast, and then I'm usually reading email, looking at essentially what stories happened that day. My 2 big deliverables with Robinhood are writing a twice a week like markets and business column on Tuesdays and Thursdays. So figuring out like what are the big stories that I want to write on, and then maybe working on like a longer story in the back or a quick piece that we'll put up on the website. But that's essentially what my like during normal working hours looks like. Spend the morning, especially Monday, Wednesday morning, like finding stories that I want to work on for the next 2 days. And then Monday afternoon, Tuesday morning, and Wednesday afternoon, Thursday morning, like putting together my column for like bi-weekly column for those days. As far as the blog, typically at home at night or on the weekends, like on Sundays. And then with the book, I'm still trying to figure out if I want to be a morning writer on that and spend a couple of hours in the morning every day or evening. So far, it's been evening, but I think I'm going to switch and try to get up at like 6:30 and just start on that before I do anything else when your mind's fresh. But that is very much a work in process. So I imagine over the next few weeks, I'll get that schedule ironed out.
Nice. Is there like a deadline for it?
Yeah, it's due like at the end of next summer. So I have 10 months, 11 months, something like that. So I have some time. The book process is a lot longer than I realized before I started writing a book.
Cool. Yeah, I would have no idea about any of that stuff. So exciting though.
Yeah, no, I'm pumped.
Where's the Robinhood office?
It's on West 14th Street in Chelsea meatpacking area. So office is nice. I can walk there from home, which is cool.
And you're enjoying it?
Yeah, No, I love it so far. It's my first time really going in an office that much because I graduated from college or uni, as you say in Australia, right before the pandemic hit, and then just kind of got stuck working from home. So I like having the mix. Like I like being in the office about 3 days a week is plenty, but it's been good. Our team's great. Like it's fun working with actual editors who've been doing this for years. Like it's a great overall setup.
Nice. Okay, do you get sick of telling your story? Because I'm like, there's so many stories I want you to tell, specifically about shit posting. Like,
Um, no, so I love talking about shit posting. That's hysterical. I don't really get tired of telling anything because like anytime you go on a podcast or you're meeting somebody or anything like that, you're probably talking to someone or they're going to be sharing it with an audience who doesn't know who I am. Like I feel like I have a decent sized following, but it's still very, very small compared to the amount of just people on the internet. So no, I like we can hit anything that you know about me that other people probably wouldn't. We can dive into any of it.
amazing. Do people ever recognize you on the street?
Yeah, somebody bought me a beer last weekend because he said my LinkedIn was quote fucking hysterical. I was at this party last like 2 weekends ago on a because Monday was we had Monday off, so it was Sunday because we had Labor Day Monday, and I was at a party in Brooklyn, and somebody came up and just bought me a beer and said, "Yo, like I've seen you on Twitter and LinkedIn," and I was like, "It's cool. I appreciate that. I guess thanks for the beer."
Oh my God, so nice. Okay, yeah, because in my head, I'm like, you're like such a big deal that I'm like as intimidated as interviewing a prime minister I had on this podcast. I'm
Oh,
like, but
that's
then
hysterical.
my
No,
dad's like, who are you interviewing? I'm like, okay, oh my God, it's this guy. He's like so famous on the internet, but from like shit posting. And then it's like I'm trying to explain what that means to my dad. It's just
that's
like,
hysterical. There's been plenty of times where I've met like a friend of one of my roommates or a friend of a friend or something, and they're going to introduce me, and then the person they wouldn't know my name, but they're like, "Wait, is he the guy who shit posts on LinkedIn?" So like a lot of people have seen my stuff. They probably wouldn't know it was me just meeting me, but once they hear the name and then hear a little bit about it, it sticks. Um, so yeah, that's very much a thing.
amazing. And the CV as well. Like I feel like there's multiple things of yours that I've seen that have gone like viral, I guess. Your oh sorry, resume.
No,
CV.
I
Resume.
know what CV is. Yeah. I, but yes, I've had like, I don't know, I've had a bunch of random stuff just blow up here and there especially on Twitter over the last like 2 years. So
That is so like I still will randomly just think of the like I almost thought of doing that myself, but I didn't do it with the actual resume. So it's like completely honest about it's like I'm not gonna write another bullshit resume. Like here's the honest truth. And then it's like the first title's like the one real job I've had. And then it's like gambler slash trader or something. Okay, that's what I want to ask you about losing 150,000 in a day,
yeah,
being
no,
up 400,000.
yeah, that sucked, but that is a fun story. So for context, I during the pandemic, I was very bored working from home, and I was essentially day trading my retirement account, my Roth IRA, and I turned at one point $6,000 into like $400,000. And I was 23, and a 23-year-old men are the stupidest, most impressionable like group of humans on the planet. So I obviously couldn't like I didn't really know how to handle that amount of money at that age. And then I kept trading and eventually blew like half of it, including um, losing $150,000 in a day on one trade that was really stupid. Yeah, that sucked. It, it, I honestly just felt like an idiot more than anything else. Like I didn't even have that much of an emotional letdown from it. I was just like, this was just a stupid thing to do. Like there was no need to do it. It was totally unnecessary. Like, why? Um, but I was trading these things called SPACs, and there was very much a SPAC bubble in 2020 and 2021. and I just got really good at picking the ones that were going to go up eventually, or essentially. And when that popped, I tried to just trade some stocks that weren't SPACs with like way too much money in speculative positions, largely because I thought since I was good at trading this one very niche specific part of the market that I would just like be good at trading whatever. That's not how that works. And yeah, I got humbled really fast. The thing I had a lot of money in had a bad earnings report and the stock tanked like 30, 40% or something like that in a day. And I just got eviscerated. Stopped trading after that. But most of my money's in index funds now. So
Great. Well, that was like
yeah.
a quick recovery then. You were just like, okay, tap out.
Well, I looked at it like I still net made like a lot of money from trading it. And if I would have kept trading after that, yeah, there's like some possibility I would have made money back. But realistically, I probably would have blown it, or at the very least would have had to spend an insane amount of time like trying to figure out what to trade. And it's just like it wouldn't have been worth it. There was a very easily kind of exploitable bubble that I made a lot of money on, and then it stopped. And if you don't have another thing that you're sure or you have a high degree of confidence in that you can make money from, you shouldn't just be throwing money at stuff. So I didn't, and I was so sick of just like the amount of headspace that stocks took up when I was doing that. Because there's like, when money's involved, you put so much pressure on yourself for stuff. It messes with your head more than literally anything. Like you don't want to lose money. It physically hurts to lose money. So I was honestly just tired of stressing about it. Like I was still in a pretty good spot and I had like a decent amount of tax-free money now saved up in my retirement account. So it made more sense to like focus on actually living my life, not just staring at a screen all day, hoping the right line goes up.
Got it. So what's the platform you use if it's in your inside
I
your
was trading on TD Ameritrade, which is now owned by Schwab.
got it. Okay, I'm really interested to learn more about your relationship with money as well as it comes from your growing up. But
Yeah,
let's talk about how you grew up, just in general, in Georgia.
cool.
Paint a
Um,
picture for us.
I'm from a very small town called Tifton in southwest Georgia. It is basically in the corner between Alabama and Florida. College football is a religion in that part of the country. Everybody has their team. Georgia Bulldogs, Florida Gators, Alabama, Auburn, South Carolina, Tennessee. Like you spend your Saturdays watching college football. Um, we had a farm with a tractor and cows, horses, all this stuff that was like 30 minutes from my house. My grandparents lived like right by the farm. Um, yeah, everybody like went to church every Sunday. Everybody played football, played baseball, like outdoors. Hunting was huge. It was the classic quintessential like Southern town in the United States. It fit a lot of stereotypes, and it was good. It was a great place to grow up. Like I love my high school experience. I went to a small high school in town. Everybody played every sport. Like pretty much for the most part, everyone was friends with everyone. Um, it was good. And my whole like the only thing I wanted to do basically all the way through high school was play football in college, American football for everybody in the land down under. Um, and I played football at Mercer University, which was also in Georgia. It was a small Division I school. It's so funny to me because America is the only country where college sports are a relevant thing. But if you play a high school sport and you're any good, the like pinnacle achievement is to play in college, especially at the Division I level. And Mercer was a very small Division I school, but we were Division I, so it was like the everybody's worried about like what they're going to do with their career or where they're going to go to college, and the only thing that I cared about from ages like 14 through 17 were I want to play football in college. Like, where can I play? Am I good enough to play? How do I get somewhere where they want me to be on their football team? And I was very fortunate for that to work out. I loved my college football experience. But yeah, like my whole thing was it was hot. It was hot down there. You go to church every Sunday, and I wanted to play football. That was my existence.
What kind of church?
Southern Baptist Protestant. So not a lot of Catholics in the South. America is southeastern part of the United States. It's very much Protestant denominations like Methodist, Baptist, Presbyterian, and then you go up north, and then anybody who's Christian is Catholic if they're from like the Midwest or the Northeast. And then if you get to California, like nobody believes in God, so you kind of you get a mixed bag as you go around the country. But yeah, Southern Baptist.
Got it. So was it like an intense thing with like particular beliefs, or it's just like a relax, like everyone goes? It's like,
Not really. It was almost like you definitely have some people who are more, I guess, involved in the church than others, but it was sort of your social group too. Like a lot of the people I played football with went to my church. Like you would go on Sundays. Maybe some people would go to stuff on Wednesdays, but it was very much it was sort of your social group. It wasn't like, I don't know, like there's some churches in some parts of the country that are like very extreme and almost cult like, and ours was like you go you go to church, you probably like see a lot of people you're friends with, maybe people from work or from school or whatever. Go out to lunch with your family after. It was as much of a weekly tradition as it was anything else. It's just part of it.
nice. And what's your family like? Like, do you have siblings?
Yeah, so I have a sister, Frances, who is about 5 years younger than me. She just graduated from University of Georgia and is now working in Alabama. Um, my mom, she got remarried like 2 years ago, and she lives in Birmingham, Alabama. She is an interior designer. And then my dad, who also got remarried about 7 months ago, he owns a bunch of furniture stores randomly. He used to be an attorney, owns a bunch of furniture stores. Uh, yeah, my family was together when I was in high school. My parents split up when I was in college. So growing up, it was like a very normal family. Like we were the classic two kids, two parents, like had a decent sized house. We had two dogs, a swimming pool in the back, and we had like a big yard and a pond. I feel like I probably had the most stereotypical small town family upbringing of all time. Like family went to all my football games. Dad had the most like dad joke sense of humor all time. I was probably closer with my mom. My sister was probably closer with my dad because that's just how that seems to work. Yeah, my grandparents on my dad's side also lived like 20 minutes from us, and I'm fortunate, like I'm 27 now and all my grandparents are still alive, so I'm going home in a few weeks and I'll get to see all of them. My dad's parents lived near us. My mom's parents lived in North Carolina and Florida. They split their time between the beach and then a mountain house. um, so yeah, I mean, I saw all my grandparents regularly. Family was great. Like it was I don't really have one of those like traumatic come from nothing upbringings or one of those like ultra wealthy, crazy, like you'll see sometimes in New York. It was just I had a pretty good upbringing. Like I got a truck when I turned 16. That was cool. Um, yeah, that was basically South Georgia.
Do you know how long your families have been in the South?
Um, Definitely for a while. I'm pretty sure both sides of my family immigrated like a couple of 100 years ago, maybe 300 years ago from England. I did 23andMe, and my ancestry says it's all northern England and Scotland. There's like a bubble around the Edinburgh area. So I've been to Edinburgh twice and think it's beautiful. So maybe that's why I have some like deep rooted ancestry there. But uh, no, I know for at least like 5 or 6 generations they've been in the Georgia/Alabama area. Like my dad's side of the family has been in South Georgia forever. My mom's side is split between Alabama and then Western Georgia, but it's all like very similar. So at least since my grandparents were alive, so 150 years plus.
Mhm. And is it all pretty homogenous there where you grew up?
Yes, it a little. The only difference is like it's very homogeneous in that every small town in Georgia is fairly similar. Um, the difference is like there's very much a southern white culture versus a southern black culture versus a southern like Hispanic culture. So there's differences there. But if you went to Tifton, Georgia, and went to like 20 other small towns around Georgia, you're going to have the exact same dynamic of like a few small businesses, a few people own a lot of the land. The wealthiest people in town probably own 10 automobile dealerships like in the area. A lot of farmland everywhere. Like, yeah, it's the football is one of the most important things. There's not a lot of difference between where I'm from and then 100 other towns like within North Florida, Alabama, Georgia, even like North Carolina, Tennessee, South Carolina. The South is it's pretty culturally homogenous, or at least every town in that area is very similar to every other similar town in that area.
Got it. But demographically, it's mixed. It's not just like you went to school with only white kids.
So I went to a we my school. I went to like a private school the whole time. I was going to transfer. So basically, Tifton has one public high school, one public middle school, and they're both big, like 600 kids in each class, 700 kids in each class. But the elementary schools, there were four. And based off of where we lived, I was going to be zoned in like the worst one. So my parents were going to just put me in the private school for like 4 years and then switch back. And then I loved it, made a bunch of friends. They made a bunch of friends. So I ended up staying, but my school was probably 80 to 85% white when I was there. Uh, we had a few black kids, a few Indian students, a few like Southeast Asian, and then one or two Hispanic students. But for the most part, it was largely white kids. Uh, Tift County High School was probably majority white with a decent minority population, black and Hispanic, and then like a little bit of like other groups too.
And so, were you interested in finance or markets, or like what else were you interested in at school, or was it just football mainly?
So I was a good student in high school. I graduated. I was number one in my class out of high school, and I just figured that I didn't really have a super strong career interest in high school, other than I figured that I would probably study finance in college because I didn't want to be a doctor or a lawyer. And I figured that there would be more higher earning outcomes coming out of finance if you didn't know what you wanted to do than anything else. And I thought markets were interesting, but I didn't really have I'm going to go do banking or I want to be like a hedge fund analyst or anything like that. I just figured finance. Um, Mercer University, I enjoyed my time there. It's very much not a target school for like big banks or consulting firms or whatever. So my job options were very much like corporate finance roles in Atlanta and a few other cities in the South. But I'd gotten into business school at Columbia out of undergrad. Columbia had a deferred enrollment program where they would let you apply as a college senior. And then if you get in, you would work 2 to 5 years and then go to business school after that. So I got in when I was a senior in college, and then I took a job at UPS, the like mail company, not the bank, uh, and worked there for a couple of years, and just figured I would go to business school and then get a much more prestigious, higher paying job that I wouldn't have had access to before after that. And
And what
then I went.
what were you driven by?
Um,
Because I assume that's not the path for like a lot of people you grew up
no,
with.
it's not. I have one other friend from growing up in New York, and we are very much the outliers. Like most people, some people, how it usually works if you're from a small town in the South is if you're fairly smart, you go to like the University of Georgia or Clemson, Alabama, Florida, or if you're like very smart, you might go to Duke, Vanderbilt, Georgia Tech, or Emory, and then you probably work in Atlanta, Charlotte, Nashville, a city somewhere in the South. A few people might go to Washington D.C. or New York, but that's like very much outliers. Um, I, I don't really know. Like, I don't think there was one particular driver other than I just didn't want to feel like I'd wasted my life. Like, I didn't want to underachieve. It's kind of how I looked at it. Like, I just wanted to get the most out of life, and not necessarily in a, that can mean a lot of different things to different people. And I didn't know what exactly that looked like at the time. Like if it meant like a job thing or like have accomplished different things in my life or anything like that. I just knew that I wanted to do stuff that I would have to make an active effort to like get to and achieve, if that makes sense.
Mhm. What did your parents want for you?
Um, just do what I want with my life. Like they were very, they definitely pushed me to be my best, but they never pushed me to play a sport, or they wanted to make sure I made good grades, but I was very much self-motivated student. Like it was a hubris thing. I knew I was one of the smarter kids in my class and wanted to graduate at number one. Um, they they never really had to push me that hard because I was pretty much a self-starter for most of my childhood. Um, I think they just wanted me to like make the most out of my opportunities as different opportunities emerge. Uh, that was about it. Like I still talk to them about it sometimes because I certainly didn't do the most traditional pre or post business school path, but they've been very supportive and like proud of me the whole time.
And what are their values?
Um, Probably hard work and honesty over anything else, both like to yourself and to other people. And my parents are both very much their own person. Like my dad he was an attorney for a few years and hated it. And a lot of people do that and hate it and stick it out. And then they make partner. And then they just did something they hated for 20 years. And I think there is value in making like short term sacrifices for longer term goals. But if the longer term payout is just a higher paying version of a thing you don't like, that's probably not what you should be doing. And I think I picked up on that from both of them because like my mom was a teacher for a while. She loved that. Then she stopped after she had me, but then she like built out basically her own business doing interior decorating. And then my dad wanted to run his own business. So he and his brother bought these furniture stores and they built out like a good business from that. They still run, I don't know what the total number is now, but they own a lot of furniture stores in the Southeast. But like I didn't have a like I feel like a lot of people probably have a model figure from their parents of one or both of the parents like is in an office from 8 in the morning to 7 o'clock at night every day. Like this is what work looks like. I never had that. My parents kind of like did what they wanted and they found out good ways to like kind of build out and carve out the lives they wanted. So it was I think good for me to see that you can be like financially successful and support yourself while doing like less linear career trajectories.
Yeah, amazing. That's great. So what was your relationship like with money when you were growing up?
I was very frugal, like probably more frugal than I should have been. I would get money for chores or my birthday or like doing work during the summer, and I would just keep it like in a book in my room. I would hoard it a little bit because it was crazy because my parents like they paid for all my stuff when I was a kid. When I was in college, like they made sure I had enough money to live off of in school. Like I never really up until I graduated from college and got a job, I never had to be like self-sufficient on anything. If I needed money for I mean, they wouldn't let me just blow thousands of dollars on dumb stuff, but if I needed money for gas, food, rent, whatever, like they would give me the money. Like I was fully supported by them. But I always felt a little bit like I think I felt a little bit guilty about like overspending my parents' money because I hadn't been the one who earned it. And they never said or did anything to make me feel that way. It was just like a personal kind of hubris thing almost. I didn't like feeling like I was spending someone else's money. Um I still feel that way. Like I hate feeling like I can't or I'm not making enough money to like handle all my own stuff.
Got it. So then did you feel guilty that okay, I'm just projecting because I dated an American guy for many years and it was like I was like, let's quit our jobs, go traveling, and then move to London and what like we'll get a job
Yeah.
again. But it's like there's gonna be this period where we're like backpacking, which isn't expensive anyway. But it was like so much fear. It's like, oh my God, you can't like parents sacrifice everything. And even the reaction of like my colleagues and stuff that they were like, how can you quit a job? Like parents have sacrificed everything to send us to college and now we have to work like forever. And you can maybe enjoy life in 40 years from now when you've like made enough money. but the idea of not working for a bit is just totally the wrong thing to do. Like, did you feel that at all when you went
No.
backpacking?
So I remember, like, for context, I'd spent the last well over a year and a half just like doing Excel models and spreadsheets and PowerPoints on a computer from my like bedroom or living room. I was sick of it, and I'd made a lot of money trading stocks, or at least enough money where I didn't need to make money for a year, and I was fine. I remember telling my dad, I was like, I don't think this job is it. Like, I want to go do something, anything different. Like, I wasn't happy or content. And the thing that really made me mad was I like working hard on stuff. Like, I always have. I hate feeling that the work I'm doing isn't building toward anything. And because I knew that I was going to business school the year after that, and my current job at the time really just didn't matter in the grand scheme of things, I hated feeling like I was wasting a year. Like, if I'm not enjoying it and it's not like, I think if you're going to make sacrifices that take up a lot of your time, it needs to be something that's building toward a later payoff. If it is, good. Like, that's you can determine your own mental calculus on if that's worth it or not. But I didn't want to just sit around idle and just like work to make money when I didn't need money for the next year. So I told him I was thinking about just like backpacking Europe and South America and riding. And he said, okay. He was like, I'm not gonna bankroll it, like I'm not gonna pay for it, but if you're confident in your ability to like essentially cover all your own expenses while you do it, he's like, I can help out some when you're in school. But if you like, I'm not gonna subsidize your lifestyle for you to just do your thing for a year, but if you can pay for it, like, do it. I don't care. You can come back on the family health insurance plan for a year. So yeah, he was the perfect level of supportive where, and then he told me that he wished when he was younger, like he'd always wanted to after law school, like either travel abroad or travel around the US, and just never did it because he started working, got married. He was like, yeah, that's something that I wish I would have done in my mid 20s. So he was very supportive in that. He encouraged me to do it, but he also wasn't going to like subsidize it, which I think is fair. I think that especially if you're going to travel for close to a year, it'd be crazy to like, I would never pay for my kid to just do something like that. If they want to do a like a month or so trip after school, yeah, that's reasonable. But I would not have wanted him to have just like given me money to go find myself abroad. But I think if you can finance it on your own, cool. I never had the that is a very American thing to have this like to be so career brain that you like think it's crazy to unplug. That was never an issue for me. I figured that I would go to school, get a job. Like if I quit a job and then I had plenty of money, I could always take a 3 month gap and then go get another job. Like it's if you're if you're competent and you have a good education and you have decent work experience, like there's always going to be a market for you to work there. So I looked at it more like if I didn't go travel when I was 24, I didn't know if I would have an opportunity to do so later. And I was pretty confident I wouldn't have an opportunity to do the like hostel hopping, backpacking. Because even if you do it later, it's like, that's very much a 20s thing. And most of the people who do that are in their 20s. That's who you're going to be hanging out with. It's a more enjoyable experience to do that when you're younger instead of older.
Cool. Okay, wait. So where were you when you were working at UPS?
Atlanta.
Okay, but it was COVID, so you were like just at
I
home.
was I was living in Atlanta though. I had an apartment with one of my best friends from college for 1 year, and then the next year we moved to a like 3 bed, 3 bath house with another one of our friends. So and even when I was traveling, I kept paying rent there because I would come back periodically for like a month and then go somewhere new. So I was living in Atlanta for like I had an apartment in Atlanta for 3 years.
And the business school thing came out because you worked out at some point in college, or did you know this for ages that you'd end up doing business school? It was like, I'll prioritize football, then I'll prioritize a good school to have on my CV.
So I did like going into undergrad, I figured that I would either go to business school or law school just because I wanted to go to a slightly better school for my terminal degree. And then as undergrad progressed, I figured I would probably go to business school. Applying to Columbia while I was an undergrad was like, I did not plan to do that ahead of time. I always had I'll probably go to business school at some point, but I just kind of found out that Columbia offered a deferred enrollment thing. I was actually so with college sports in the States, you're given a period of 5 years to play 4 seasons. So a lot of freshmen don't play because they're 18 going against 22-year-olds, and we call it getting redshirted, where you don't play that season and then you play the next four. And a lot of kids will get like their master's degree with that 5th year of eligibility. But there was a loophole where normally if you transferred schools to play sports, you would have to sit out a year. But if you transfer as like a graduate student, like you graduate one school and start a grad program at another school, you can play immediately. So I was looking at graduate transferring and play my last season of football at Yale. We had played them the year before. I played well. They had a good MBA program. They had a specific MBA program where they would let some students start right out of undergrad and then uh, like study for a year, go work for 2 years, and then come back and finish it. And it would have like the timing would have worked well with me. So I was looking at grad transferring and doing that, and I saw that the Ivy League doesn't let grad students play sports because they don't want somebody to transfer, enroll, start playing a sport, and then like drop out of business school, law school, whatever, once their eligibility was up. But from seeing that Yale had that program, I also saw in some forums that like Harvard, Columbia, Stanford, all these other schools had deferred enrollment MBA programs. So I just applied to all of them and got into Columbia. So like I would have liked to have gone to Columbia or somewhere similar the whole time, but I found an opportunity to apply then and went for it.
And then you got to keep playing football, but not as a student.
Yeah, oh yes. So then I talked to Columbia after I got in, and they were cool with me sticking around Mercer and playing that like football's a fall sport in the U.S. So I would have stuck around and played that next fall, and then like technically graduated December of 2019. I like graduated, got my diploma the May before, but I just took like 4 or 5 classes that fall to stay eligible. I was just a non-degree seeking student taking like random stuff.
Oh my God, amazing.
It was
That's
the
how.
best semester ever. Like everything was pass fail for me because it wasn't counting toward a degree progression. So it was the only semester where, and I didn't like I wasn't active. I'd been my fraternity president the year before that. I didn't have any of that responsibility anymore. Like I literally just played football and then went to class 70% of the time and didn't really have to study because I just had to pass. It was a fantastic 4 months.
So you took classes you were just genuinely interested in.
Yeah, like I took tax accounting because I thought it would be useful, but then I took the economics of sports because all the case studies were on like how the NFL decides which cities it's going to put new teams in and all of this stuff. Uh, so I took a mixture. Like tax accounting was a class that it kind of sucked, but I thought it was useful. Sports econ was great. I don't remember what the other two were, but they were kind of a blend of probably useful or relevant, but also just an interesting class I wouldn't have otherwise taken.
And what position did you play? Football.
Defensive end and outside linebacker.
Got it. Oh my God, fun. Okay, and I love the post you wrote about business school. I think I just love how like brutally honest you are and
I
like
appreciate that.
about like failings and like it's just the truth of what happened. And so it's like applying for business school but feeling self-conscious that you didn't have some like amazing job lined up, but then just
Yeah.
telling Columbia the truth that how football was so important to you. And then they let you in.
Well, it's like people appreciate authenticity. There's so many status games out there, and there's like I don't know. You worked in investment banking, right? So you probably saw this where there's a lot of people who are very high achieving, but don't necessarily know where they want to direct that ambition and high achievement. And there's a whole industry that's set up to like give those people a place to go and do that. And it's like there's a lot of career paths where if you don't necessarily know what you want to do, but you want something that pays well, that keeps open a lot of options, banking, consulting, maybe law school, like big law. There's nothing wrong with any of those. Like I have a lot of friends doing like all those and more because they genuinely either don't know what they want to do or they wanted to break into something where they came from a non-traditional background. And those are very good ways to do that. If you've never worked in finance, you want to work in finance, it's good to go to investment banking after business school. like I have 5 or 6 friends doing that. That's what they should do. Um, but it's easy to get stuck doing that too, where you don't know what the next thing is after 2 years. So you take the maybe not the thing that you want to do after banking, but the thing that people kind of push you to do, whether that's private equity or like I don't know. It depends on the person. There's you can go a whole career by just being really really good at your thing and then just doing the next thing without actually thinking through like what's the stuff that I want to do with my life. And um I think it helped me a little bit having like a non-target, non-traditional background, and that I was almost forced to lean into authenticity because I wasn't going to outcompete somebody in the eyes of an admissions department off of like having like better achievements. Like I went to Mercer. Okay, I had a 4.0 and I studied finance and Spanish. That's great. There's kids with 4.0s that went to Harvard that speak 5 languages that also studied econ. Like I wasn't going to beat that, but having the like football going from bottom of the depth chart to starting and like all that other stuff, it it's it just showed a more unique path, but it showed that I was very capable of like getting what I wanted when I set my mind to it.
And so did that ever bother you, like at Columbia or like coming into the New York marketplace, which I guess is way more competitive? Or were you just like, I'm I'm more of an outsider and like I'm
I
ready
think it
to
would have
compete?
bothered me if I didn't go to Columbia, but if you get into Columbia, like everybody who got in is now in the same pool. Whatever your background is, there was something about you that the admissions department gave you like a thumbs up for. So if anything, it's like a little maybe more interesting that I didn't come from a like the same school as a lot of people, but still got in because I probably had to lean into something else. It's a little different. Or like we had a club rugby team that I played on. A lot of my friends on that team were military veterans, and they had all sorts of crazy backgrounds. Like some of them went to like no name schools, but they served in like the special forces in the Middle East for 5 or 6 years. And those guys are nuts, and they didn't go to Stanford undergrad. Like one of my best friends from business school played football at Sacramento State, but he also spent like 9 years in the Middle East and then worked on a cattle ranch, like lassoing bulls for a summer. Like just fascinating guy. Um, but yeah, we all went to school together. So if I had just moved to New York for work with a Mercer degree, I probably would have felt more like an underdog. But since I'd gotten into Columbia, and the same thing once I was in New York, whether in like social or professional situations, nobody even asked about undergrad. It's like any education related thing was Columbia Business School. So no, there's situations where if stuff had gone differently, I probably would have felt like that, but not with how my stuff played out.
Yeah. Okay. And you're just like at peace that that's like football was that important to you, and even though you did like well academically, it's like that's what your priority was.
Yeah, like I grew up in a place where football was the thing, and then I started playing when I was 12 and just loved it. And my thing was, all right, I was realistic enough that I didn't actually think I would go play professionally, and I would not have been willing to sacrifice career stuff to like attempt to play in like a semi-pro league or whatever. But I was pretty confident I could play at the Division 1 level, and I was like fringe good enough too out of high school, and it worked. And I got to college, and I was one of the worst guys on the team my first year, but I just enjoyed being on the team. I enjoyed having that thing to work toward, and it just like it was just fun. I loved every aspect of it. So yeah, I have no. If I had thought through it a little bit differently, I may would have optimized for trying to play at one of the Ivy League schools like as a student because they were like competitively on the field were very similar to us. And I actually went to a camp at Vanderbilt University, and I was a little bit too short to play there. I was 6'3", and I had a great camp, and the coaches said we would love you to walk on here, but we were recruiting a guy who's 6'5". A lot of the Ivy League coaches were there who also saw I had a good camp and told me to come up to a camp at like Yale and Harvard and Princeton. And I already was going to Duke one weekend and then Mercer and then Furman and didn't have like, there was not a free weekend to do it. I probably would have dropped the Mercer Furman camp and gone up there just to do it because had I had a good camp there, I may have played at one of those schools. But since I ended up going to business school at Columbia, it sort of canceled out that need for an Ivy League pedigree. I very much do think having a good education, like going to the right schools, helps. Like I'm not a, oh, college doesn't matter. No, it totally matters. It puts you around higher caliber people, and it gives you like a stamp of approval off the rip that other people don't have. But considering, like, I don't regret how mine went, considering that I still ended up at a good graduate program. If I hadn't, I might feel differently now, but it worked out for me.
Yeah. And I feel like playing football in the South would have been way more fun than because Ivy League, it's like people
People
don't
don't
care
care.
as
Yeah.
much.
It is. What's funny is a lot of the players on the Ivy League teams are from the South. Like it's because football isn't as big in the Northeast in general in high school, so they recruit a lot of kids from like the Southeast, the Midwest, and the West Coast. Um, but like the fan atmosphere and all that's definitely better. And it was nice being close to my family. Like they could drive to all the games. It was cool having like friends and family come watch. So yeah, I have no regrets about it.
Amazing. Okay, so going back to UPS days and day trading, was that just because it was like, okay, there's nothing to do, I'm bored,
Yeah,
let's.
it was the same reason people sports bet. You're just like you can, and you have money, and then you have a lot of free time if you're working remote, and you probably don't have that much impulse control if you're a 23-year-old guy. So it was like a perfect storm. And financial markets then were just going crazy too. Everything was going up and down 20% a day. So you have like so much just external stimulus like right in your face, like stocks up, stocks down. Why not? Um, so yeah, I just started doing it. I initially while I was in the office for a week before we went remote, and I bought a lot of put options on the S&P when everything was tanking. It made like I tripled my money, and it was just euphoric. And then I did it again at the literal bottom, and then everything went up, and then I lost all the money I made, and it was depressing. So I said I was going to stop, and then I saw SPACs, and I thought they were interesting because there were a lot of them. A lot of companies were deciding to go public through them. And SPACs had warrants, which were essentially call options that didn't expire for 5 years, which meant unlike the options I had just bought that expired a month out and their like value declined really quickly, warrants gave you a lot more time to be right if you thought something was going to go up a lot. So it was like a perfect storm for me to then just like throw money at those and see what happened. And it worked.
And the relationship with the money was just kind of like you weren't thinking about
It
what
was
it
a
was.
game. It was a after two or three trades where I just figured out that niche market segment, and like I just got a very good sense for what was working and what wasn't. Yeah, it was the money was a way to keep score. And it wasn't any of the money that I was like I didn't need that money to live off of. If I would have lost all of it, it would not have impacted my like ability to pay my bills or anything like that. But it was a scoreboard, and I enjoyed watching the number go up. The problem was when you're doing that, you don't know when to stop. And as soon as that bubble popped, I should have just cashed out. But I legitimately thought I could go from like $6,000 to $1 million in a year. And I was at the rate I was going, I was like three trades away from making it happen. Obviously, it didn't, but that was my mindset.
Got it. Okay, so then when you decided to quit, it just happened. It's like, oh, cool. Well, I have this money.
Pretty much, I realized that like the market as an entity had basically taken up all my headspace for the year before that, and it just hit me like I'm going to business school in a year. I have this money here. It's really going to mess with me if I blow the rest of it trading. And I have enough that I can actually go do something with it. Like, why not actually? I basically like felt like I'd lost a year of my life between the pandemic and then just being so glued into markets. Why not make the most out of the next year and just go do and see as much interesting stuff as possible? And like, I made the money, so I might as well spend it on something. And that was kind of it. And I just threw the rest of it, and I sold some of it, paid the penalty or whatever for an early withdrawal from a retirement account, sold my car, and then put the rest of it in like an S&P index fund and just bought a one-way ticket to Barcelona. That was it.
Nice. And had you traveled much before that?
I studied abroad in Spain one summer, and I traveled a little bit. I'd been to South America, Ecuador one time for a school trip. My grandmother took me to Tanzania on a safari when I was 11, which is cool. And then I'd studied abroad in Spain. And when I was there, I also visited Portugal and Paris for a couple of days. So a decent amount for a 23, 24-year old, but nothing like extravagant.
Cool. And so was that like a big deal leaving work? Like, did people give you a hard time?
It it was a big deal, but like most of my team knew that I was like they knew I wouldn't be there that long anyway because they knew I was going to Colombia after a few years. So that wasn't like that big an issue. Some of them said they were jealous. I don't know if they actually were or that was just a like make me feel better about doing. They probably just thought I was having a quarter life crisis and wanted to make me feel better. I don't know, which I probably did a little bit. I think that's fairly accurate. Um, it was like it was a big deal, but it wasn't. It felt like a massive deal to me because I legitimately felt like I was just jumping into some unknown and like exploring the world and I didn't know when I was going to come back to the States. It was a one-way ticket and I thought I would just stay gone for a year. Um I ended up coming back for Christmas because my grandma would have killed me if I hadn't. But yeah, like I don't know. It felt like a bigger deal to me than it probably would have to like anybody externally, but it was like it felt kind of scary jumping off that cliff, but I was glad I did.
And is that when you started writing as well?
Very close. I actually started writing a little bit before, like a few months before I started traveling. I was still trading stocks, and one day I just Googled how to make money writing about the stock market. I saw that Seeking Alpha would pay you like $100 a pop to write about different companies, and I just like started writing freelance articles, and they would send me money every week. And then I tried to get a couple of, I knew I was going to do the travel thing and applied to a couple of companies for like remote writing jobs, and nobody would hire me because I didn't have that much writing experience. So I just started writing my blog as basically a tool to build a portfolio to prove, hey, I think I'm a good writer and I know what I'm talking about. And I was going to use that to reapply to those jobs in 3 months. And then I just kept blogging and just like kept doing it on my own, which I didn't think, it's not like I was thinking super far to the future, but that ended up being huge for me because now I have like a very big like email distribution list and all this stuff. Like it's been infinitely more valuable to me keeping that than just like doing it for 6 months and stopping. Yeah, so I started writing Young Money then, and then I was writing a separate travel blog while I was traveling, just like detailing everything I was doing abroad. But yeah, I started doing that maybe a month or two before I left, and then once I decided to go to Barcelona, I figured it would be cool to like document everything I was doing.
And is that like you needed the outlet? Like when you first thought about writing about stocks, was it like you needed an outlet to talk about everything you were experiencing? Or was it like, how can
I
I
have no
capitalize
idea why I
on?
wanted to. I just thought it was like an interesting thing to do. I thought financial writing was so cool, and I didn't know how you went about finding a publication that would pay you to do it. And I just started doing it. I just liked it. That was it.
Cool. I guess because you would have been reading loads of stuff.
Yeah,
So you were thinking about it.
it did help me organize my thoughts too. Like writing is a very good forcing function to get you to like collect your thoughts. Um, but I just thought it was cool. Like I thought it was cool that it was just this thing you could do wherever you were and just distribute your thoughts to the internet. I thought that was just the most fascinating thing ever because like I have a lot to say and I wanted to share it with people, and I realized that there is some sort of market where you can get paid to do that. And that was the extent of that thought process.
Cool. Okay, so writing about traveling as well. It was just like it just flowed. It wasn't like you had to force yourself to
Yes,
do it.
but that one was more intentional in that I wanted to document all of it so I could read it back later, like 5, 10, 15 years, and just have all the fun stuff I was doing abroad. And like, it's been 3 years, a little over 3 years since I went on that first trip. And it's still fun to go back and like read about it. Or one of the guys that I met when I was in Barcelona just happened to be in New York for work 2 weeks ago. And like, I grabbed drinks with him and his friends. And I had not seen this guy since we were in Prague together, like 3 years ago on the dot, and we just picked up like we hadn't left. Like it was so cool. Um, but no, it was like writing has never been a it's never been like a chore or a thing where I have to like force myself to do it. The, the hardest part is eliminating distractions, both from the internet and from my real life. But if I'm sitting down at my desk and I have like phone put away and all that, I can just go for 4 hours easily.
Amazing. And do you ever feel, this is like clearly a projection for me, but do you ever feel cringe about like stuff you've written in the past and like, oh my God, why did I share that with everyone? Or like I've changed my mind, like I don't think the same anymore. And now that's out there.
I've definitely changed my mind. I've never cringed about anything that I've written, or at least I've never cringed about like a blog post or anything like that. I've probably put some stuff on Facebook when I was a kid that I would hate to see now. Um, but no, nothing on my blogs. It's like it's just my thoughts on stuff, and I do change my mind a lot, and I've rewritten about stuff where I've changed my mind after. But I don't know. Like I think that the stuff that you would cringe about, I'm never going to cringe about sharing like my actual authentic thoughts on something. And I've been very particular not to try to like pander or just write what I think will get, like I'll definitely lean into engagement stuff sometimes in social media, but even with that, a lot of it's in jest, making fun of how other people are so performative on social media. um I mean, some people cringe at just anything self-promotional in general. I do think there's a level of having to swallow your pride. If you want people to read your stuff, you have to be willing to put yourself out there. But no, I've never looked back on anything that I wrote as cringe.
What was the flight? Was it to Denver or something where you had this like existential thoughts about life?
Yeah, so that's I actually forgot about this, but I have written about that at some point. This would have been December of 2020, and it's kind of silly to think about now, but I was flying to from Atlanta to Denver to go skiing with one of my friends and our girlfriends, and the flight was just super choppy, and I don't like turbulence now. I hated it then. Like I hated flying in general. I legitimately had a huge fear of flying when I was like 23. Um, I've forced myself to get over it by just flying as much as possible over the last 3 years. But at the time, hated it. And, you know, your head, like, if I don't know if you have a fear of flying or not, but people who do, like, you'll get in your head and you think the plane's going to go down because it's bumpy and you're just kind of paralyzed by fear. And my brain does this whole, oh, like the plane's going to crash and you're going to die. And then it went a step further and it was like, and then what? And, you know, like I, as someone who grew up going to church, this and that, would still say I'm a Christian, but slightly more introspective about, am I a Christian because I think it's right? Or is it because I'm just from South Georgia and you grow up going to church? I'm still sorting through that whole thing. But it really messed with me because it was a very like weird random catalyst for it, but it just made me very, very, very aware that we're not around that long and that I'm not young for that long, and that there's like it just made the finiteness of everything so like in my face. I just couldn't shake it. Like I thought about it for weeks and it was just eating at me, and I wasn't depressed because it was very related to a specific thing, but it was just like a very like negative cloud over me. um then I finally just got over it. I like a couple months later it just hit me that this sucks, but like this is just kind of how the whole thing works. Like your whole life is just one massive opportunity cost, and you got to make the most out of it. And that has been a pretty constant framing for me on how I've gone about doing anything. Where maybe sometimes to a fault a little bit, where I can be a little bit impatient and want stuff to work now because I'll occasionally view what probably is a very worth it sacrifice is something that like I'm very, very intentional about not giving any external thing too much of my time because I think that's a very finite asset that we have. It's probably part of the reason why, actually, it's the primary reason why I didn't go into a more like traditional locked in like long hours job. I probably would have done that. That was like my plan was going to go into consulting after Columbia. Um, a dream job would have been probably working at Bain, and I still think if I was doing consulting, that would have been my favorite firm to go to. I don't think that's a hot take, but yeah, I didn't want anything to like control how I spent my time for an extended period of time because you don't get it back. So that became a frame with how I made most of my decisions.
And your post of like looking at life backwards.
Yeah,
Okay, that's not the title. But oh, I feel like I want to link it or send it to everyone because it's such a
you
beautiful
should.
post.
It's one of my favorites, and I love when more people read my stuff. But yeah, that's how I look at it. Like, I think that what most people mess up is I think a lot of people are fairly like intentional about thinking through what they want to do with their lives, but they're very bad about thinking through when realistically they'll be able to do it. So, like, say you want to do a backpacking trip, right? The the best time to do that is in your 20s because the other people doing it are going to be in their 20s. It's much easier to explain when you do eventually have to go back to work that you spent 4 months doing that in your 20s. Um, your taste is a lot cheaper. So, like, you're probably much more fine with sleeping in hostels and stuff for like $15 a night versus when you're, say, like 37. Probably not going to want to do that with a bunch of like drunk 21-year-olds. But if you're 24, it's phenomenal. Who cares? It's like the best. Um, so that was like one example of a thing where it just hit me that this is something I want to do that I think is going to be very fun, that I'm going to look back on and be glad I did it. It would be so stupid not to just go ahead and do this for some like vague abstraction about like, oh, I need to be more financially stable. You don't have to be financially stable at you're 24. You're 24. Like that's you should you should be spending every excess penny you have on stuff that you enjoy and just make sure you make more money as you get older. Like I don't think people should go into like credit card debt or anything, but I think that if you're confident that your income is going to increase as you progress in your career, it's okay to spend a bigger portion of that income when you're young on fun, interesting activities, even if you feel a little bit more financial anxiety about it at the time.
Yeah. It's so funny, like, because culturally here, it's just so normal to like have gap years and
Yeah.
travel. But I know coming from the US, it's just like totally different how people think about it. And even how people think that travel's like really expensive when it's like it doesn't have to be. You can literally like jump on the back of a cargo. You can like whatever. You can get a Greyhound bus like down into Guatemala and then start working at a hostel like if you have no
Yep.
money and pay
Well,
your way through.
well, New York is it's arguably the most expensive place on the planet. It's definitely the most expensive place in the United States, especially like in Manhattan in the like more well-educated bubbles. So people like you have generally a more expensive taste and that reflects on how they travel. Like a lot of people probably wouldn't like the more vagabonding, like kind of reckless travel style. I've looked at it like an adventure and it was cool. And I was also financially constrained where I didn't have any money coming in for the first 4 months until I started like figuring out how to make money with all the online stuff. But I like if I wanted to travel for a year, I had to be very careful not to blow my cash. So you figure out how to do it and how to enjoy doing it for like $20 a day. It was awesome. Yeah, that's a very American thing to not like get that.
Okay. And then you also managed to talk Colombia into like keeping your place, even though you hadn't technically worked. What was it you
Yeah,
had to say that you
the
were?
issue was I didn't work long enough before starting. So Columbia, through the deferred enrollment program, one of the stipulations is that you have to work between 2 and 5 years before you start. And had I just graduated normally in May 2019, I would have hit that. But because I played football an extra semester, I didn't start working until 8 months later than I would have. And then I quit my job in August of 2021. So I only worked from February of that year to August of that year. That was 18 months. And because of that, we had to send like an employment update the fall before we wanted to matriculate. And my let's see, I sent it in like November, and in December they contacted me because like I probably should have just said I was still working at UPS. They would have had no way of confirming that. I like in hindsight that was I should have just lied. But I said that I had like left my job and I was like I'd done well trading stocks and that I wanted to spend the next year traveling. I did say that like I wanted to go work for a hedge fund after school, and I think that making a 6,000% return is pretty that I can actually point to as this was across 60 trades and not just a GameStop YOLO was pretty good evidence of my ability to do so. And they called me and said, we don't think you have enough relevant experience. You need to push your matriculation back one more year and like get more work experience. And I didn't want to do that. The reason I was traveling then was to do it for exactly 1 year before going to school. I didn't want to go get another job. Like that didn't fit my timeline. And I I took a couple of days and then emailed the admissions department and basically wrote a 2,500 word email explaining like my decision to go travel, how I was looking at it, especially after I'd made the money, and how I just felt like I wasn't getting much out of that job, and explained that I thought that it would have been a net negative for my personal development to stay in a job that really wasn't like just wasn't doing that much for me just to hit some benchmark before school. And also pointed out that a lot of the people in my class were probably working very similar kind of BS jobs. It would be different if the pandemic hadn't happened and I was in the office and having all those like in-person relationships. When everybody's working on Zoom and Skype and Teams, like there's a lot of people just doing fake work that are still going to go to business school. So my take was effectively, you're going to be letting a lot of people in that are essentially just sleepwalking through their stuff. And I don't think that I should be getting punished for deciding to actually do something with my time versus just like faking it. But if y'all disagree with that, maybe like Columbia isn't the best fit for me because that's just how I look at it. And
Did
they,
you write that?
I said that I think the direct phrasing was, um, like if y'all disagree with my basically my breakdown of this, then maybe like me and the admissions department have very different views on what is to be considered relevant experience. And if so, that's fine. I'm going to keep doing my thing. And they emailed me back 2 days later and said, you're in. So it worked.
Oh my God, amazing. Were you worried about it or you were like, no, this is
I was
legit?
just
Oh,
angry, honestly. And even after I got in, I thought about not even going just out of like, I don't know. It's like the classic like if your girlfriend cheats on you and then like you're sad, then she wants to get back with you, and it's like, no, like you didn't want me the first time. I don't want like it's very much a reverse psychology dynamic where like I was so just had so much like righteous anger about the whole thing. I almost didn't want them now that they wanted me. But then I was like, if I'm an admissions officer, I probably wouldn't have let the kid in initially either that worked 18 months and bought a one-way ticket to Barcelona. Like that's not the most relevant on paper. It's not the most relevant pre-NBA experience. So with a little reflection, I get how they drew that conclusion.
and you were writing as well.
Yes, but I mean, I was writing like travel blog and Young Money, but I had like 300 subscribers then. Like I did not and I hadn't started writing for Liquidity and doing exec sum. It was a newsletter that I ran for 2 years. Like I had a lot of stuff that really gained traction that spring, but it hadn't happened yet. So had all of that taken off more, it would have been easy to say, oh, like I quit my job. I'm now an editor at this daily financial newsletter. We have like 300,000 subscribers. Like it would have been like, oh, we want to go work for a startup for a year, which is effectively what I was doing. But I hadn't started that yet. Like at the time of turning this in, I was starting to have the conversations about doing that stuff, but I hadn't actually started it yet.
Got it. Okay, sorry, I always run over, but before we wrap up, can you please tell the story of your favorite LinkedIn post? No, well, sorry, there's the vaccine one, and there's the New York how to save money, never pay for a meal.
So my personal favorite one is neither of those, but I can go over all three. For context, I don't do it as much now, largely because like I have a job, so it is like I still like to be satirical on LinkedIn, but it's less just the most outrageous shit post and more just spontaneous humor. But I used to write really long form satirical pieces on LinkedIn, honestly, to just to kind of make fun of the LinkedIn hustle culture bro type of content that I just hate to see on there. Like there's so much just terrible like BS work influencer advice. And I figured out you can make fun of that with satire, and if it's funny, it's also a really good lead generator to drive people to my blog. So I like the last couple of years just writing like every week, putting out a new one. And one of them, I claimed that I wasn't paying for food in New York. Like I hadn't had to buy food in months because I kept going to different hotels around Manhattan and like just walking in, eating there, like they're eating the breakfast, lunch, dinner, and then like signing off and charging it to random people's rooms and referred to it as like personal finance, or I'd said like follow me for more personal finance hacks. That one was crazy. Like an alumnus sent a screenshot of it's our dean of students, and I had to go meet with her. I thought I was going to get kicked out of school, and she realized that it was just like I was just messing around, and it was just to drive more people to my blog. And she thought it was funny after that. Like she was completely on board with me continuing to do that. Um, so that
But
was cool.
wasn't she like, just to confirm, you're not stealing food, are you?
Yes, she did. She did ask to make sure I wasn't actually doing that, and I said no. And then I sent her some of the other posts, and she realized what was happening, and she thought it was funny after understanding. Um, I had another one where I claimed that I got vaccinated 1,000 times in a 2 week period when New York was paying people $100 to get vaccinated, and said I made $100,000 through a vaccine side hustle. That one really got people going. Like there were people that like were like vice presidents at like different banks and at Microsoft and stuff claiming that I was like stealing vaccines from impoverished people. And I was just like, I obviously know that would kill me. You can't get vaccinated 1,000 times. That's absurd. That one got flagged for vaccine misinformation by LinkedIn, which felt crazy because I was like, this is the most pro-vaccine post you can get. It's not like a conspiracy theory saying the vaccine's causing autism or something. I'm very pro-vaccine. Claiming I got it 1,000 times is like the most positive endorsement you can get. Um, but the best one by far that got like way more views than any of them was claiming that I got an internship at Goldman Sachs by winning the Goldman Sachs beer mile. Goldman Sachs CEO David Solomon had been like this part is real. David Sachs, not David Sachs, Goldman Sachs CEO David Solomon is a DJ and like plays at like Coachella and different concerts and stuff. And I made up this whole fictitious scenario where he got advice from like some people he'd been partying with on picking the best interns. And he decided to have them run a beer mile where you chug a beer, run a quarter of a mile 4 times. And the reason is that it shows that you have like the stamina to do the long banking hours. And banking is like an alcoholic heavy culture. So it shows that your liver functions too. And I did this like it was a 1,500 word post about how I'd been training for it for months by like waking up, drinking a beer, and going and sprinting down the West Side Highway. And then I won. I beat out like 50 other like intern applicants, and excited to start at Goldman in 2 months. And it just went nuclear. I mean, it got like 2 million views, 10,000 replies, like people calling out Goldman Sachs, like misogynistic culture, saying this whole thing was ableist against people who couldn't drink or couldn't run, like it was sexist. And I was like, well, one, it can't be sexist. We had a female beer mile too. Like, if anything, at least it was equal opportunity. I don't know what to say to that. Um, that we did actually have a business school beer mile that I competed in my first year, and there was a guys and girls beer mile competition. But I was mind blown by how many people just assumed that this actually happened. It was obviously just complete like fabrication. But I don't know. It was fun. That was my favorite.
Oh my god, I totally missed that. Did Goldman say anything?
No, but I had a couple of friends who worked there who said like some people on their like HR team had talked about it. Like it wasn't worth making an announcement, but it was enough of a thing that like people were looking at it.
That is classic. Surely most people get it's a joke.
Yeah. But if 98% of people get that it's a joke and 1 million people see it, that 2% is still like 2,000 people that don't get it that are pissed. And when people are angry, they're like much more willing to comment on something. So you'll get, 100 of those every post that goes nuclear, and it's just beautiful.
And you like don't feel bad.
No,
when that
it's
happens.
I think if people want to expose themselves for not understanding satire, that's totally fine. Like I have no issues with that.
Got it. Yeah, because then you like reply to people like this is like no, what was one about fraud? Someone's like the definition of fraud, like for the hotel one, it's like using credit card to like steal money or something. You were like, yeah, that's why I just signed the room number, like
Yeah.
no credit card required or whatever.
Oh, it's so fun to like comment back, like condescendingly. I pulled back from it a little bit, but that was a very fun thing. I still do it sometimes, just on a much lower level. The problem now is so many people have seen me do it that there's less and less people to fall for it because people just kind of know me as the guy who shitposts on LinkedIn.
Yeah. It's still entertaining though for the rest
It
of us.
is. It is. Good.
Okay. Do you have anything else to add? Where
I think
people can
that's
find you?
yes, yes. So I am very active on LinkedIn and the site formerly known as Twitter, X. If you just look up Jack Raines, Raines, I have a cowboy hat on in my profile picture. And then, more importantly, if you would like to read my blog slash newsletter, that is at youngmoney.co. Co. So that's where I share all of my actual good longer form writing, and it's where I would most like people to sign up if they wanted to follow me anywhere.
Amazing. And do we have a book title?
No, I mean that'll come much later. So the book stuff, there's not going to be a lot to add about that for probably a year.
But it's stuff about money. You wrote a
Yes,
post, didn't you, saying like what it's going to be about?
yeah. The gist is, in a nutshell, I think it's especially geared toward young people, but I think most young people do a pretty poor job of like living the life they want because they make very risk averse, conservative decisions that are based in like that are financially based. Like a fear of running out of money, needing more stability causes people to take certain life paths and then they get stuck as they get more responsibilities and they get older. And it's harder and harder to divert, and it just keeps you from doing what you want with your life. So the book is essentially my thoughts on how people fall in that trap, like what the risks are and the actual opportunity cost of that, and then how to avoid it. So we'll follow up in a year when it's done being written, and then a year after that when it's published. And yeah.
Great. Okay, last quick 3 questions. How do you stay grounded?
Um, well, living in New York helps because there's constantly people who are richer than you, better looking than you, and seemingly more successful than you all the time. So I think just living here has been very good for that. Like it's easy to stay fairly humble when there's a lot of things that can humble you in the city. So that's been it's been good. And it's like I don't know, I like looking back at like I journal a lot, so being able to see what my thoughts were 3 years ago and stuff when I first started writing and all of this stuff, like everything that's going on in my life now is stuff that I like would have been just the furthest, most like far out there dream 3 years ago. So it's been nice to like see the progress that I've made, but then also see all the external stuff that's like, remember, you're still just you.
Nice. Is there a book that's had the biggest impact on your life?
Um, Probably Vagabonding by Rolf Potts. It's a book that he wrote. He was a National Geographic journalist, and he wrote a book on just how people can integrate travel over the course of their lives. It's called Vagabonding. I have it right here. Vagabonding, an uncommon guide to the art of long-term world travel. So great book. And it just like kind of it was the it was like a light bulb going off above my head that oh my god, I need to do this, and this is a very feasible thing.
Amazing. And wait, sorry, I have to add a bonus question because you're
Okay.
American and American politics is just like so fascinating to the rest of us. What what was the political environment like where you grew up? Like is it really like
It's very conservative. Like it would be like the entire South outside of the big cities is very Trump, like probably 80%. Or whoever like George W. Bush, Mitt Romney, John McCain, Trump, like whoever the Republican is. Uh, yeah, so just super, super conservative. And then the cities are super liberal. Atlanta was very liberal. New York's very liberal. So it's very dependent on if you live in like a rural area or an urban area for the most part.
And what's your bet for the election?
I think it's a coin flip. Like I legitimately so after Trump got shot and almost killed, I thought he was guaranteed to win. And then when like Biden stepped down and Kamala came in, I thought she was guaranteed to win because a lot of people just thought Joe Biden was too old. Frankly, like myself included, I was like, I don't think he has 4 more years in him as president. But now there's a lot of people caught up somewhere in the middle where maybe they don't like Kamala's economic policies, but they also think Trump's a terrible person and have no idea what he's going to do economically or like with immigration. And then there's so much slander out there about both of them. It's hard to separate fact from fiction. I legitimately think it's a toss up. And then you've got the whole like Kamala is going to get more votes. She'll probably win the popular vote, but because we do it with a state by state electoral college, it legitimately depends on like what Pennsylvania and maybe Georgia and Arizona do. Like I live in New York and I'm a registered New York voter, so it's like New York's going to vote for Kamala. I know that. Georgia, complete coin flip. So we'll see. I couldn't tell you.
Do you think the polarization's getting worse or better or neutral?
I think Trump's been worse for polarization. I don't know. I go like back and forth on it because I also think social media has been a bigger thing over the last 3 election cycles than it ever was before that. So people are just more exposed to and bombarded by stuff all the time. And there's no way of validating how much of it's real. Like the current one is that there's a 20,000 Haitians in a small town in Ohio that have like eaten a lot of the wildlife and people's pets. And there is like a big Haitian immigrant pool there. I don't think there's any confirmations of anybody's pets getting eaten, but it's a fear mongering thing that scares people. But there is a massive immigration wave that people have all sorts of feelings about that. But then the flip side is, oh, they're actually much like harder working populace than the local lower income people who have more like substance abuse problems. So but on social media, you're seeing all these narratives play out about the same thing. Like the one true fact, there's a lot of immigrants in this town in Ohio. Most of them are from Haiti. Whether that's good, bad, right, wrong, it depends on who's saying what about it. So you have, and that's just one example of a story that's been going on the last 2 days. You have so many, like hundreds of those that play out over an election cycle. I don't know. I think that we have a debate tonight, and honestly, I'll probably have a better feel after that because it'll be interesting to see how they do on camera with each other.
And do you feel like you can have like amicable conversations about this stuff, or it's like if you're in Georgia, like you just
I
shouldn't?
think I can better than most people because I've had the fortune of growing up in a very rural conservative place and also living in like very upper class, like high income cities too, where I played college football with a bunch of rednecks and then a bunch of black guys that were like very conservative and very liberal. So like I've had like I don't know. I feel like I can like play the part of either side if I wanted to, and I can also see arguments from both people's sides. So if I'm talking to somebody else who's like got decent emotional intelligence, they can be nuanced. We can have a conversation about stuff. But if I can tell that somebody has predetermined opinions, I don't even engage in politics or I just agree with them because if somebody's like diehard Trump and you make any critique, they think that you're like a dumb lib. If somebody is like so totally anti-Trump off of personality stuff. They think like if somebody thinks that you're just by default a horrible person, if you can come up with a reasonable like argument for supporting either candidate, then they aren't talking to you in good faith anyway. So there's no point. Like you can, yeah, if it's somebody who is down to like just chat about stuff for sure, like all day, I can talk about like what I think about either of them, pros, cons, but I'm careful about who I have those conversations with because some people are just looking to like yell at you.
Yeah, great advice in general. Okay, last question. What 3 words describe the best version of Jack?
Um, joyful, excited, and ambitious.
Amazing. Thanks so much.
Oh, thank you for having me.
Hey guys, thanks for listening to this conversation. Feel free to share it with someone if you think they'd get something out of it. And you can also subscribe or follow the podcast so then you find out about new episodes. And purely for my own ego, no, just kidding. I think it actually helps the algorithm and helps more people find the podcast. If you want to rate or review, like, go for it. And see you next time.